Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and good Shabbos. It is Shabbat, Friday night here in Huntington. The day started off kind of gray, dark, and rainy, but by the end of the afternoon, the clouds had broken, the sky was blue, and the sun was shining. So it was the day didn't end. The day didn't start so well, but it ended quite beautifully, as is fitting for Shabbat. All right, let's ease our way into Shabbat a little bit, put the events of the last week behind us, let everything go that might have accumulated during the week onto our shoulders, and we'll let that go, and we'll begin. We have Sam right here, and he is going to bench licht for us, as they say in the Mamaloshin in Yiddish. He's going to light the candles.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words which shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahalit ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Thank you, Sam. Sure. All right, let's continue reading responsibly on page 6. In the middle of the page. May the door of this synagogue be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for fellowship.
May it welcome all who have cares to unburden, thanks to express, hopes to nurture.
May the door of this synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity.
May its threshold be no stumbling block to young or straying feet.
May it be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness.
May the synagogue be, for all who enter, the doorway to a richer and more meaningful life.
All right, let's continue. We'll move to page 20. Lecha Dodi, a song that comes to us out of the mystical city of Tzfat in the Galil, up in the northern hills of Israel. And if you've never been to Tzfat, you are missing one of the great, beautiful places in Israel and one of the most beautiful places in the world, built on a hillside. It is considered one of the most mystical cities in the world, and it's no doubt mystical, and that's what brought a number of the Spanish Jews who were leaving Spain in 1492 after the expulsion. A number of Jews landed there who turned out to be some of the greatest Kabbalists in our tradition. And so Shlomo Alkabetz penned Lecha Dodi for us, and they would sing it as they were going out. They would go out into the fields. The mystics would go out and watch the sun set behind the hills in the Galil. They would dress in white, signifying purity, and they would welcome the Shabbos bride with psalms, as we do, and songs like Lecha Dodi. Verses 1 and 2, 8 and 9 on page 20. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad, Ishmi'anu el hamyuchad, Adonai echad u'shmo echad, L'shem tiferet v'litila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nikabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki mekor ha'bracha, Merosh mikedem nehesucha. Sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila, Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela, Yamin u'smol tifrotzi, V'et Adonai taharitzi, Al yadish ben partzi, V'nihi smecha v'nagila, Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela, Boi v'shalom ateret bala, Gam b'simcha u'tzohala, Toch emunei am segula, Boi chala, Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Let's turn the page to 22, and let's read together in the English the top paragraph, a song for Shabbat. It is good to praise Adonai, to sing hymns to your name, O Most High, to proclaim your steadfast love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night, with a 10-stringed harp, with voice and lyre together. You have gladdened me by your deeds, Adonai. I shout for joy at your handiwork. How great are your works, Adonai, how very subtle your designs. A brute cannot know, a fool cannot understand this. And in the Hebrew at the indented paragraph, Tzadika tamar yifrach, ke'erez balvanon yiskeh shetuli, b'veit Adonai, b'chatzrot Eloheinu, Yafrichu. O Jinuvun b'seva, Dishenim v'ra'ananim, Yihiyu lehagi, Ki ashar Adonai tzuri v'lo havlatabo. All right, let's turn to page 24, and we'll get another Kabbalistic song as we make our way through Kabbalat Shabbat, Shalom Aleichem, a song welcoming the angels, the two angels who come to spend Shabbat with us each week. Top of page 24. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitchem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All right, we have completed Kabbalat Shabbat. We have eased our way, gotten stretched a little bit, getting ready for the Shabbat evening service, Aravit l'Shabbat, the evening service, and that will begin on page 145 with Chatzi Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach Yerutei v'yamlik malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, Bahagala, u'v'zman kariv, v'yimeru amen. Yesh me Rabba mevorach, leolam lo me'almaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitbar, v'yitramam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitalev, v'yitalal, shmei dekudusha, barichu, leila min kol bechata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, dahamiran b'yalma, v'yimeru, amen. Page 146, Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed. On page 147 near the bottom, let's read responsively. Adonai, your majesty is proclaimed by the marvels of earth and sky. Sun, moon, and stars testify to your power and wisdom.
Day follows day in endless succession, and the years vanish, but your sovereignty endures.
Though all things pass, let not your glory depart from us. Help us to become co-workers with you and endow our fleeting days with abiding worth. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. Top of page 148, Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta, Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, B'shochbeinu uv'kumeinu, Nasiach bechukecha, V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, Uv'mitzvotecha, Le'olam va'ed. Ki heim chayenu v'orech yameinu, v'orech yameinu, uvahem nehege yomam v'layla, yomam v'layla. V'havatecha at yisir mimenu li'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, B'chol lavavcha, u'v'chol nafshecha, u'v'chol miodecha, v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavecha, hayom ha'levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, Uvlektecha v'derech, uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha, ukshartam liot al yadecha, v'hayu latotafot beineinecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uvihisharecha. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Let's turn to page 151 and let's read responsively in English in the middle of the page. We worship the power that unites the universe, a promise of harmony for all.
Yet that oneness eludes our grasp as imperfection and evil abound.
Before our eyes, there is a vision of perfection, order, and goodness.
There is evil enough to break the heart, and there is good enough to exalt the soul.
When will redemption come?
When we grant everyone what we claim for ourselves.
Long ago, we escaped the tyranny of Egypt. Our people saw the power of the Most High.
We learned God's presence redeems time and event, so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom.
Top of page 152, Mi Chamocha. Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai, Mi Kamocha Nedar Ba'Kodesh, Norah Tehilot, Ohosef Eleh, Malchutecha Ra'u Vanecha, Bokeyam Lifnei Moshe, Zeli Hanu V'Amru, Adonai Imloch Le'olam Vahed, V'nemar Kifad Adonai et Yaakov, Uga'alo mi'ed chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Top of page 153, the first two lines of Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, V'ha'amidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, V'ha'amidenu shomreinu l'chaim. And let's read together in English. Give us a place to rest, O God. Shelter us in the long, soft evening shadows of your truth. You are true protection and safety. In your presence we find love and acceptance. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. Top of page 154, verses from the book of Exodus. Vishamru. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael, et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, לדורותם ברית העולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל et ha-Shabbat. La'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם ברית העולם. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. We're now at the centerpiece of the Friday night service, the Amidah, and we'll be chanting together pages 155, 156, and 157, and then we'll continue silently 158 through the end on 167. You can chant along with us in the Hebrew, you can follow along in the English, or take this time to offer up your own personal prayer. But we'll begin together on page 155. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot Ve'imahot, Umevi Goel Livnei B'neihem, Leman Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, V'Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim Atah Rav Lahoshia, Mashiv HaRuach, U'Morid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechayei Metim B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, Umatir Hasurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Givurot, Umidom Melach, Melech Memit Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'chayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei hametim. Still continue your Amidah. Please continue at your own pace. We're going to continue reading in English together on page 160 in the middle. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may we all live in such a way that this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. All right, let's continue on 163 at the top. A little bit of gratitude, a little bit of hoda'ah in Hebrew that gives us the word todah, a thanks. At the top of the page, let's read responsively. For the good in us, which calls us to a better life, we give thanks.
For the strength to improve the world with our hearts and our hands, we offer praise.
For the desire in us, which leads us to work for peace, we are grateful.
For the life and nature, harmony and beauty, for the hope of tomorrow, all praise to the same source of blessing.
Let's continue now. Page 164. We'll close out our Amidah with Shalom Rav, a prayer for peace. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov benecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol eit uvechol sha'ah bishlomecha. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. And let's read responsibly the paragraphs in English. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes.
Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of our world. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart.
Praised are you, Adonai, who blesses your people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamevarech et amo Yisrael, b'shalom. I'm going to jump ahead to page 253, the Mishaberach, the prayer for those who are ill. And if you have somebody who needs a little special healing this Shabbat, whether it's spiritual, emotional, or physical healing, keep them close to your hearts and in your thoughts as we continue in the middle of the page with Mishaberach. Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of all strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mikor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Let's turn to page 258, and we'll continue with the prayer for our congregation, for our country, and for Medina Yisrael, the state of Israel. And let's read these together. Source of all being, may the children of this community learn these passions from us: love of Torah, devotion in prayer, and support of the needy. May we guide with integrity, and may our leadership be in your service. May those who teach and nourish us be blessed with satisfaction, and may we appreciate their time and their devotion. Bless us with the fruits of wisdom and understanding, and may our efforts bring fulfillment and joy. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadcha b'yirah na'avod. Thus says Adonai, this is what I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of lawlessness, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry, and take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, give clothing, and do not ignore your own kin. If you banish the yoke from your midst, the menacing hand, the evil speech, if you offer compassion to the hungry and satisfy the famished creature, then your light shall shine in darkness. Avinu b'shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'golo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Gulatenu. Hagen Aleha Biavrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha V'amitecha L'Rasheha, Sareha V'yoetzeha, V'taknem Be'etza Tova Milfanecha, V'natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'simchat Olam Liyoshveha, V'nomar Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. All right, friends, Shabbat Shalom and good Shabbos. This week we are in the book of Exodus. Last week we started with the first parsha of Shemot, called Shemot, in which we are introduced to the next major character, and next to God, the most major character in the Torah. His name is Moshe. And this week we're going to continue his adventures as he goes before Pharaoh to demand that Pharaoh release the children of Israel from their bondage and let them go free. So this morning, in this week's parsha called Va'era, God speaks with Moshe, continuing their dialogue, reminding him that God has had an ongoing relationship with the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, along with the Israelites. So God is saying to Moshe, look, I'm not coming out of nowhere. I've had a relationship with your forebears, and now we're going to continue this relationship. And to Moshe, God makes 5 promises. There are 5 promises that God makes that God will fulfill. And just so you know, the first 4 are the basis for the 4 cups of wine that we drink at Pesach. That's where the rabbis, when they were creating the Haggadah and the Seder, they relied on these 4 promises and gave each of the promises a cup of wine. And the promises are, God says, Hotseiti, that I will free you. God says, Hitzalti, I will deliver you. God says, Ga'alti, I will redeem you. Lakachti, I will take you. And then the 5th promise is Heveti, I will bring you. Now, there's 5 promises, but only 4 cups of wine. The 5th cup, which is Elijah's cup, comes from the final promise, Heveti. And the reason why the rabbis didn't give the 5 cups, they gave us 4 instead of 5, is that Israel would be in exile after the destruction of the Second Temple. And so when God says, Heveti, what God's saying is, I will bring you into the land. Well, there's no land right then and there. Israel, the Jews, have been exiled after the destruction of the Second Temple. And so that 5th cup always remained a hopeful cup. However, now we might be able to have 5 cups because God has brought us back to the land of Israel. So God makes these 5 promises to Moshe, and he says, now go and tell the people that I sent you, that I'm making these promises. So Moshe, the good servant, goes, and the people reject him. They say, no, thanks. No. And so Moshe goes back to God, and God tells Moshe, well, okay, you might have had a bad spell with talking to Bnei Yisrael. Go to Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh that I am God and I want the children of Israel, I want Bnei Yisrael freed. And Moshe is reluctant to do this, and he says that to God because he fears that if the people didn't listen, right, the people who had the most stake in getting free, then Pharaoh won't. Plus, Moshe reiterates and reminds God that he doesn't speak well, right? Even though he knows the language of Pharaoh, he's not a public speaker. So God says, don't worry, I've got you covered. Aharon will speak for you. He'll go with you. And God warns Moshe, saying, look, I'm sending you to Pharaoh, but he's not going to give in easily. He's going to take some convincing, and plus I'm going to harden his heart so that he learns a lesson. He's not going to give in, but just go and trust that I've got things covered. So Moshe and Aharon approach Pharaoh, and he's not impressed. And so Aharon throws his staff on the ground. It turns into a snake. And Pharaoh's magicians, they take their staffs and they throw them on the ground. And behold, they become snakes. So they're not impressed. But then Aaron's snake eats the other snakes, bringing that part to an end. Pharaoh hardens his heart and says, nope, that's a parlor trick. Anybody can do that. So then Aharon and Moshe say the next day, we will turn the Nile into blood. And so Pharaoh says, all right. So they turn the Nile into blood. And then Pharaoh's magicians turn around, and when it stops being blood, Pharaoh's magicians turn the Nile into blood. 7 days pass, and then Moshe comes back and says, let the people go. Pharaoh says no. Moshe says, all right. The next plague is frogs. And out of the Nile come a tremendous amount of frogs, or one big frog. And we'll talk about that frog tomorrow. And the Pharaoh's magicians can't do this. And Pharaoh gets upset, and he says to Moshe and Aaron, if you get rid of the frogs, I'll let you go. And then as soon as the frogs are gone, Pharaoh changes his mind and reneges on his permission. The next day, lice infests Mitzrayim infests Egypt, and the magicians can't, like with the frog, the magicians can't do this one either. And Pharaoh's heart is hardened and he refuses to give in. Then this is followed by a plague of insects, the death of the livestock, boils on the Egyptians, and a plague of hail. Pharaoh at each time promises to let the people go, and at the last minute changes his mind. And the Parsha ends with Moshe basically saying to Pharaoh, let my people go, and if you don't, it's only going to get worse. And that's it's kind of a cliffhanger, right? Because we want to know what happens. Well, we know what happens, but it's still a cliffhanger. What will Pharaoh do? How bad will it get before he gives in? I know the end of it. I'm not going to tell you. All right, we are working our way through a list of 7 values that the organization Keshet has put out for creating an inclusive community. And we've talked about a number of these midot, these character traits. We've talked about kibud. We've talked about honor and respect. We've talked about, and I'm going to blank on all the ones we talked about. No, we talked about 4 of them, right? We're on one more. I cannot for the life of me remember all of them. Oh, well, glad there's no test. But this week, we have one that's comes to us from the rabbis, comes to us from the Talmud, and it's bandied about. A lot of people will probably have heard of this one. It's Kol Yisrael Averim Zeh Bazeh. And what it means is all Israel are responsible for one another. And this comes out of the tractate or the part of the Talmud called Shavuot, not Shavuot for the holiday, but Shavuot with an E. And it deals with oaths. What happens when you swear, when you make a promise and swear using God's name. And while the tractate is not all that exciting, the rabbis, in this case, take a sidetrack and they discuss the notion of communal responsibility. Now, for the rabbis in the Talmud, what they're discussing is the domino effect of sin. What happens if you let somebody sin? And what they mean by sin in this case it doesn't necessarily mean it's some, top shelf sin like murder or adultery. But if you let somebody disregard the commandments, the mitzvot, it's going to have a domino effect, the rabbis felt, right? So you say your neighbor decides he's not going to keep Shabbos. And so you're watching him and nothing really bad happens to him. So you think, maybe I'll start to not observe Shabbos. And then somebody sees you doing that and they do that. And so it kind of has this domino effect. And what the rabbis were afraid would be the domino effect. And so the rabbis, with this idea of all Israel are responsible for one another, feel that it's the obligation of every Jew to make sure that other Jews don't stumble and commit these sins, right? That we're to call them out. Because if you ignore a minor transgression, then that might lead to a major transgression, and then pretty soon the community falls apart. And this comes from an idea that it's found in the Torah. It's called tochacha, and it doesn't really translate that well into English because the English that's used is often harsher than it really needs to be. Tochacha is translated as rebuke, right? So you call somebody out on something, right? So if you see somebody committing an aveira, a sin, the Torah says you are obligated, and the rabbis build on that. They say you are obligated to tell that person to stop, right? Now, you don't have to do it publicly. I mean, unless it's a big mitzvah, somebody's getting ready to murder somebody, stop them. But if you know somebody is lax on other observances, it's up to you to talk to them and say, hey, what's going on here, right? And so it's a moral dimension to this idea that all Israel is responsible for one another. But the interesting thing is that, and that's the concept, this Kol Yisrael Averim Zeh Bazeh, or La Zeh La Zeh, sometimes it's written, for a very, very long time stayed in that realm of calling people out, being responsible for calling out bad behavior. Right? But then somewhere along the line, and I think this is the beauty of our tradition, is that the meaning changed. And it went from this kind of moral certitude that we have, you're sinning and I want to talk to you about it, to the idea of social protection. That all Jews are responsible for each other means that we need to ensure that other Jews have their basic needs covered. Basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter that are taken care of. And this has been expanded greatly in the modern world, where there are places, we have food banks, we have places where, especially in more traditional or Orthodox neighborhoods, you'll have what we would call a thrift store. That if you go in and if somebody goes in and says, I can't afford much, they will, give clothes, they will give shoes, they will give food. There are places where they can find affordable housing. But it's also expanded to people who might need a loan, right? So we have the Hebrew Free Loan Society. And we have other organizations that take this idea of being responsible for Jews very seriously. And it's usually the elderly or people who are disabled who benefit the most from these programs, or this idea that all Jews are responsible. But it happens in every community. Right? In our community, if we know someone needs some help, it's incumbent upon us as Jews, because all Jews are responsible for each other, to try to reach out and to help. And it could be monetarily, it could be with food, it could just be a phone call to make sure somebody is all right. But we are responsible for each other. But when I think about all Israel being responsible for each other, I like to think that it also means that we work together to inspire each other, that we want to build a community that is welcoming to all Jews, regardless of their gender or their orientation or their color or their abilities or their level of observance. We want to build a community because we're responsible for the well-being of all Jews, that we build a place where people feel at home, people feel welcomed, and people feel inspired to be proud that they're Jewish. It's a lot of work, right? We are responsible for each other, and it's always been that way. Moses felt responsible for the children of Israel. The rabbis felt responsible for their charges, and we, as modern Jews, need to feel responsible for each other. We must all take action, right? It's nice to talk about it, but we have to put it into action, and we have to inspire others to build community, our community, a community in which we all can take pride. Shabbat Shalom and good Shabbos.
Shabbat Shalom.
Sam, you know what time it is?
Kiddush.
It's Kiddush time. Yes, it is. Time for Kiddush. Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Voker, Yom HaShishi, Vayechulu HaShamayim V'Haaretz, V'chol Tzivam, Vayechal Elohim Bayom HaShvi, Melachto Asher Asa,
Vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa. Vayavarech Elohim et yom hashivi. Vayikadesh oto. Kivo shavat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim la'asod. Savri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit. Ki hu yom techila lamikrae kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim. Ki vanu vacharta, viotanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim. V'shabbat kodshecha, v'ahava uvratzon, in chaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
All right, we are at the closing of the service. We are on page 282, Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, la'teit gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kagoye haratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot hadama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, U'mishtachavim u'modim Lifnei melech Malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu She'hu notei shamayim v'yoser haaretz U'moshev yikaro b'shamayim v'mal U'shchinatu zo Bigov hey meromim, Eloheinu einod, Emet malkeinu efes ulato, Kakatu v'torato, V'yadata hayom v'hashevota, Elevavecha. Ki Adonai hu Elohim, b'shamayim imal, v'al haaretz, mitachat ein od.
Let's read together on the top of page 285. Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. O may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. V'ne'em v'haya Adonai lamelech al kol haaretz,
Bayom hahu, Yeh Adonai Echad, Ushemo Echad.
This week we observed the following yard sites: Harry Cutler, husband of Sophie, father of Ray, Ann, and Jack. Roger Gross, husband of Barbara, father of Ron, Larry, Danny, and Susan. Sanford Barnett Hyman, son of Rose and Mike Hyman. Esther Lachman Michelson, wife of Lewis, mother of Shirley Michelson Bro Davis. Morris Supovitz, Lynn Mayer's uncle. Harry N. Bahar, Tori Witcher's father. Leo Buchholz, related to Anita Buchholz. Alfreda Edelson Fantel, sister of Evelyn Weil. Minnie Bloom Glick, David Glick's grandmother. Blanche Engel Smith, relative of Bernard Smith. Janice Ambergay, sister-in-law of Judy Lundy. Bernice Herman, mother of Ira and Nancy, wife of Jack. Minnie Mendel, Ruth Shradsky's mother. Leonard Krasnow, Michael's father. Rebecca Glick Moss, David Glick's grandfather's first child. Leo Schoenfeld, brother of Ike and Saul. Ray Ginsburg, mother of Shirley and David, sister of Walter Lewis Jr. Sr. Henry Mayer, Paul's father. Ida Poland Mayer, Joan Weisberg's mother. Zena Rudin, wife of Hal. Saul Terrence Schoenfeld, Ike and Leo's brother. Nathan Shrinsky, Sherry Solachek's uncle. Samuel Glazer, Herman's brother, husband of Rose, father of Herman, Norman, and Simon. Albert Reich, Pauline Reich's husband. Marjorie Sampson, daughter of Sammy and Molly. Her brother was Sam. Jack Shear, Francis Bloch's father. Charlie C. Trout, Tamara Murphy's paternal grandfather. Alan Armster, Gloria Armster Mazel's father. Max Levy, relative of Bob Levy. Louis Mazzo, brother of Selma Mazzo Jacobson, uncle of Steve, and great uncle of Paul. May their souls be bound up with the bond of life eternal. May their memories be a blessing to us all, and may they all rest in peace. Page 294, Mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal, V'it Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma Divrach Hirute, V'amlik Malchute, B'chayichon, V'yomechon, Uvchaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala Vizman Kari V'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Li'olam Ulamei Maya. Yit Barach V'yishtabach V'yit Pa'ar V'yit Ramam V'yit Naseh. V'yit Hadar V'yit Alev V'yit Halal Shmei Dekudisha Brichu. Le'elam Min Kol Birchata V'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata da'amiran b'yoma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. All right, friends, just a couple of quick announcements this week. Services tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., followed on Sunday at 9 a.m. And then Sunday afternoon, we're going to have our second of 3 sessions on battling brothers. And we're going to unpack the relationship, at least in the eyes of the rabbis, between 2 brothers, or actually half brothers. They had the same father, Abraham, Ishmael. In English? Ishmael, thank you. And Yitzchak, Isaac, 2 brothers in the early part of the Torah. And then on Wednesday, the Best Little Yiddish Choir Anywhere, it meets at 7 o'clock, and you'll have a Zoom invite for that. And Sami, is that it? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it. For
All
this
right,
week.
the quiet week, some adult ed, and of course, Yiddish choir. And then we'll be back again next Shabbos. I want to thank Sam and James for being here, and Sam for being my tech guru. And we'll close out on page 321, Adon Olam. Adon Olam Asher Malach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasa B'chefso Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, Li'acharei Kichlot HaKol, Levahado Yimloch Nora, Vehu Haya, Vehu Hoveh, Vehu Yeh B'tifara, Vehu Echad V'ein Sheni, La'am Shilo Lahachbira, B'li Reshit, B'li Tachlit, V'lo Ha'oz V'ha'misra, Vehu Eli V'chai Goali, V'tzorchev li B'yetzara, Vehu Nisi Umanos li, Menat Kosi B'yom Ekra, B'yahado Afkid Ruchi, B'yeti Sham B'ayira, B'yim Ruchi Geviati, Adonai li V'lo Yira. Let's see who has said Shabbat Shalom this week. Cliff Wanamaker, good Shabbat, everyone. Thank you. Patty Ann Malloy, good Shabbos, Rabbi Juan, and everyone else here this evening. As a proud mom, I just want to share that next week, January 19th, will be the second anniversary of Erin reading in front for services. That is true. It was her first time, and then the bat mitzvah was a little over a year later with me, Rabbi Bob. Yes, it was. It was a wonderful, wonderful event. Jenny Bro, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Hoping for a peaceful week ahead. Jenny, from your mouth to God's ears. GDT, good Shabbos, everyone. Take care, one and all, and stay safe. David from Central Florida. And Judith Lentz, Shabbat Shalom, be safe and well. Well, thank you, everyone. Everybody be safe, be well, have a wonderful Shabbat, and we'll see you soon.